Well, good morning, everybody. We're glad to be here with you to share Arvada's experience in doing some things that address the aging of the population. That's a picture of Old Town Arvada. There, we're pretty proud of our old town. So come down and eat there, or spend some money when you have a chance. So some of the things that we're doing to address this question. We're working on redeveloping some of our older parts of the city, trying to do more transit-oriented development, basically trying to create more mixed-use environments that put people closer to services, that are more pedestrian-oriented. And we believe those really do address many of the issues associated with the aging of the population, as well as really being just sound growth. It really results in a better living environment for a lot of different age groups, we think. We have a dedicated police officer who's assigned to doing nothing but addressing issues associated with our older population. We do a lot of work with complete streets. You can see that lower right-hand photo there. That's 72nd Avenue, where we put in bike lanes and detached sidewalks. And we're doing that pretty routinely with all our new roads, but we're also retrofitting a lot of roads in the city, especially around our transit station areas. If you come to Old Town, you'll see Old Wadsworth being torn up north of Old Town. We're doing that to put in bike lanes and wider sidewalks, and we're starting to do that sort of thing more and more in the city, retrofitting our existing roads. But we've also adopted a visibility, adaptability ordinance and accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and we'll be talking mainly about those today. So first of all, talking about visibility and adaptability, our ordinance was adopted in 2005. It applies to single-family and two-family dwellings with more than 7 units. 15% of the units in qualifying development must be designed, built, or pre-engineered to be visible or adaptable. Additional 15% must have interior visibility features. There's also a requirement that you do a model home that's constructed with these sort of features, present an options list to a potential buyer. There are some provisions for opt-out fees for builders that choose not to do these kind of things. And you may ask, how do we come up with this 15%? Why not 100%? We actually started out that way, and we had a lot of interesting discussions, you might say, with our local chapter of the Home Builders Association. And in the long run, we felt like we had to make some compromises to get some sort of ordinance passed. So we did end up going down to 15% because we thought it was better at least to have some kind of ordinance passed. So in terms of the visible units, basically it's the kind of things that Jana was alluding to. Step-free or accessible entrance. A wide door, and interior visibility sort of features. Adaptable for our ordinance means that the home has to be pre-engineered to accommodate a reasonable cost, a step-free, one-step or graduated step entry, or a lift at the entrance. Proper grading is really the key to make new construction adaptable in the future. Also, there's the requirement for the interior visibility sort of features. And those sort of features are wide doors, wide hallways, and then at least one bathroom being constructed in a way that people that have assistive devices can negotiate the bathroom. So if you have, a walker or a wheelchair that you can really kind of, move around within the space. And then wall reinforcement to support future grab bars. Now, in terms of the opt-out fees, the way that works is we charge them $1,000 for each unbuilt unit with interior visibility features, $2,500 for each unbuilt visible or adaptable home, $10,000 if you want to get out of the requirement to have the model home, and then the opt-out fees would be placed in a dedicated account to benefit existing homeowners in making these kind of improvements. So I'll talk a little bit about what our actual experience has been. This ordinance really is still pretty untested, even though we adopted it in 2005. The developments that were already in the pipeline were exempted, and we also don't apply it to the smaller developments under 7 units. And then, shortly after we adopted, of course, the economy started going into the tank, and we didn't have a lot of development. So it's pretty untested, really. But we've seen that there's probably going to be a need for some revisions just based on the little bit of experience that we've had. Some of the builders that we've dealt with really do want to opt out, and we have a feeling, maybe the fees are too low. It's a little too easy to opt out. Right now, we also allow people to opt out at the time of building permit. And so what's happening is, a lot of people are just kind of not doing anything, and kind of getting to the end of their project and saying, oh, okay, I'm going to opt out. And so we're thinking that, maybe it would work better if we try to get the fees earlier when somebody records their plat, and then if they want to opt out, we'd have some kind of reimbursement scheme or something like that. So that's the planner view, which of course I think is the most important view, being a planner. But there's also the builder view. What we hear from the builders are, there's no real market for the visibility features. They're concerned about, the drainage liability, because a lot of home builders have been sued over improper drainage, cracking foundations. They feel grading changes are expensive. They basically say a lot of the new home buyers are young, and when I say young, I guess I mean more at the point in their life where maybe they're not seeing the need for some of these features. They're more focused on things like having the granite countertop, the home entertainment system, some of those kind of things. A lot of the buyers that we have in Arvada actually right now are kind of the move-up buyers, so they're not the entry-level people, but they're probably more the middle-aged sort of person, and they're maybe not really kind of thinking about some of these issues as much as they might. And a lot of the builders really feel this is a better approach as a remodeling issue, that the government shouldn't really be requiring all this stuff. And when people get to the point in their lives where they need it, then they should just remodel their home, basically. And, of course, the way we look at it is we need to be kind of looking to the long term and how we build our housing. And if you think about how people do really want to age in place, we really need to be designing homes that allow them to age in place. And you can't always assume that people are going to be able to remodel just because the home might have been constructed in a way that doesn't facilitate that, or when they're older, they don't necessarily have the resources to always remodel. So that's why we think it needs to be done more on the front end. We also have an accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and some of the key features there: owner occupancy, there's size limitations, it's limited to studio 1-bedroom units, the requirement of a parking space, the design has to fit in with the design of the principal dwelling. We did a lot of work on public process when we were developing this ordinance, and we actually found there was very little public resistance. We were concerned we were going to run into a buzzsaw, but we spent a lot of time on the front end going out to talk to a lot of different citizen groups, homeowner groups, and we really didn't encounter that much resistance. We did have to really decide how to deal with the issue of covenants. I think probably all the folks in the room that work for local government have a certain number of areas that have covenants, especially your newer areas. And we elected not to override existing covenants. Our ordinance basically does require any new subdivision that's developed that has covenants to not prohibit accessory dwelling units, but we felt that it wasn't really worth it to try to override the existing covenants, that it was better for us to kind of establish the policy framework, and then if if those folks wanted to change their covenants, they could do so. And most of our needs are really in the kind of the older parts of Arvada, the areas that don't have covenants. So I would like to show you just a quick little video we did, which is kind of an example of our outreach effort, and also kind of gives a little more human side to the whole issue of accessory dwelling units. So,
my one concern is the sound. Let me just make sure.
Thanks, Kevin. I hope you could hear that video because it was really well done, in my opinion. And, you know, it worked on a couple of levels. One, it was part of that high-quality outreach that the city undertook, an investment in the front end of trying to pass that ordinance that I think paid off in dividends because it really wasn't controversial. And I think that differs from the experience that some communities have had in trying to do an ADU. But secondly, that video really helps to convey the flexibility and just the dramatic appeal that ADUs have for certain individuals, for a number of individuals. And I thought I would try to reinforce some of the underlying policy issues at stake in the description of these two ordinances, especially the ADUs. The slide on the right isn't very visible, but I'll tell you that it comes from the DU Center for Colorado's Economic Health. And it's from a report, interestingly, that's called Colorado's Budget Tsunami. It's interesting how we use these water and cataclysmic metaphors for, Tom talked about the coming wave of aging seniors. But the important point is that looking forward in terms of, this is the state fiscal picture in Colorado, we've got the combination of things driving up expenses and service needs and revenues that are projected to be quickly outstripped by those needs. So the blue bar on the bottom is the combined spending anticipated through 2025, I think it was, for K-12, health care, and prison populations. So a piece of that, of course, is the health care needs being driven by an aging cohort. And in particular, let's talking about accessory dwelling units and long-term care. It's true that as the boomers age, and this is extracting from that report by Jeffrey Roberts and Charles Brown, as boomers age, the anticipation is that the need for long-term care is going to rise dramatically. And a problem with that is that most, or at least many Americans, don't currently carry long-term care insurance. And what happens is Medicare doesn't cover it. So Medicaid, and there's your issue there, Medicaid becomes the funder of resort for long-term care. So in addition to those kinds of issues, I think that line is a similar line that we see for the services that are already being referred to. Senior meals, senior transport, ombudsman service, all those kinds of things we're going to see an increasing need for rather dramatically based upon the numbers that Brad presented and that Jana talked about. And we obviously, especially currently, don't have the resources needed to address those. So the beauty of these kinds of ordinances, an accessory dwelling unit, just to underscore this point because I think it's so important, is that you have the ability for people to make private arrangements for things that otherwise fall to a publicly subsidized or publicly provided government entity. So I think it's not a panacea. It's not going to address that line entirely, but maybe we have the chance to bend it down slightly. So I just wanted to underscore that piece of it. And if you think also about the current concern about government role, the concern about intrusion and taxation, this is a policy that can be implemented at low cost. And again, it takes advantage of private arrangements rather than government action to address some of these needs that we see coming down the pike. How do I? Down arrow. Okay. So the thing I like also about the accessory dwelling units and the visitability is that they aren't just meant for addressing age-specific or aging population issues. Many of you are involved with the livability efforts here at DRCOG, and this really just dovetails nicely with that. You've got the ability here to foster a sort of gentle densification. We all know we need to densify, but if you've been involved in land use issues involving infill developments. You know they're very controversial, especially when you're increasing density or putting in multifamily. So, here's a chance to densify in a way that, well, Kevin and I have a little bit of a different view about what we're doing here. But, arguably, you are increasing the number of people per square mile and the number of household units per square mile, even if one is accessory sort of to the other one. So it's a way to do that without, or at least with less controversy. And secondly, it preserves, to an extent anyway, the neighborhood character. This neighborhood here is one of our National Register historic districts. And I don't know if it's visible, but you can tell that many of the lots they're deep and would have ample room for the construction of a new housing unit. So to the extent you can do that, they're less visible from the street. They respect the existing fabric of the neighborhood. And then this has been referred to again, but I love the idea that with an accessory dwelling unit, because of its size, principally, you have the chance to weave affordable housing into an existing neighborhood rather than cluster in a Section 8 development, say. And in that way, I think you have a healthier model for providing some affordable housing opportunities. Okay, I have to tell you, I'm just sort of the ADU evangelist because I built one both as part of a retirement plan. I don't really have a great pension plan, and also as a contingency plan. Since I don't have a family, I'm like Marion. I see the thought that it may be possible for me to afford a caregiver if I can provide a unit like this at no or little cost. So that's part of my, contingency plan for aging and staying in place. This is built, I live in a historic district also on the other side of Old Town, and I'll show you a little map in a second, but you can see this little unit and the historic shed to the side, and then the alley behind it. So it actually orients to the south and east. The front door is to the alley, and there's a little driveway off of there. And you can see it's kind of an older area, big old tall cottonwood back behind us here. I built this, actually just got it completed this year, started it a couple of years ago, and it cost a lot of money. I'll just say that right out there. But part of it was because I anticipate, like Mary and Charles in the video, that someday I might live here. And so I kept indulging, I had to get the right kind of tile floor and so forth. And there were some other issues. But the good thing is it'll pay off when I'm 65. And then at that point it becomes literally a piece of my retirement plan. And because I financed it in the downtime and had a first bank that was willing to do something that was new, got really good money, and it's affordable for me. I don't have to rent it for more than $300 or $400 to cover the hard cost for me right now. Okay, so we talked about how these work for a number of policy aims, and here's a aerial photo of Old Town Arvada, and generally considered to be bounded by Ralston Road on the north. We'll talk about that in a little bit with regard to a complete streets issue, and then Grandview Avenue on the south. The National Register Historic District is to the left of Yukon Street. That's where my little ADU is. I'm literally a quarter mile from Old Town. So I or somebody who lives there is able to walk, engage in all the services that Old Town has. By one count, over 150 different merchants, and they range from things like restaurants, hairstylists, yoga studios, churches. I mean, it really is a downtown in many cases. And so the kind of place that as you're looking at aging or having somebody who's aging, or just somebody who wants to rely less on a vehicle and so forth, you're in a good place. Now, icing on the cake is the rail stop that's planned just below Grandview Avenue on the lower right-hand side of the screen, and the existing park and ride. So we have the chance to densify near here. Part of what we're doing with our Urban Renewal Authority and the planning folks is building or looking at building some TOD, some true TOD with higher densities and perhaps a little bit higher rise. But also within the neighborhoods that bound this old downtown area, we can, with the ADUs and the visitability ordinances, create a place that works for people of all kinds. So. Okay, so I'll tell you my result, since I just started leasing it this year. With some trepidation, I put my ADU on Craigslist, and boy, I'll tell you, based on the response so far, this concept has legs. This works for communities and for the people who undertake them. I put it on Thursday night at 10 o'clock at night, and within a couple of hours, by midnight, I had 8 responses. And by the next morning, 30. So, I wrote them all back, and I said, oh, you got to understand, this is really tiny. So I described it. It's 364 square feet with a loft. And, not a lot of storage, some in the little shed adjacent to it, but still, we're talking very small. In spite of that, I still got 8 or 9 showings. And of those, 5 applications. And they were good. I would have, without hesitation, leased to 3 of those 5. And the really interesting thing is that it appealed to a really diverse set of folks. They ranged in age from their early 20s, young person right out of college, had his first job downtown and no car, and somebody, actually a divorced woman in her 60s, a grandmother who had been living in apartments and badly wanted to get back into her own place but couldn't afford a lot. And everything in between, a nursing student, a researcher who worked at the University of Arizona telecommuting, and a businessman who commuted up to Denver for a job who actually lived in Colorado Springs. So really had just a diversity of people for whom this prospect would work. So I readily negotiated the price, $650. That included the utilities. No problem, nobody quibbled, and she only was here for 6 months. I kind of wanted to stick my toe into the water there. She was very pleased with the living unit. And so just tell you that from that personal standpoint, wearing both hats, I think this is something that communities can undertake in the current environment that works and can help us in a sort of broad fashion, part of a big piece, a big strategy for dealing with some of the issues that we might see with an aging population. Okay, and then I'll just wrap up by talking about a couple of other efforts. Along the lines that Jana, she did such a great job of describing the complete streets, and Kevin mentioned that we have in our Old Town area streets and streetscapes that we've already redone and that are quite nice. The kind of thing that you associate with the downtown area, and that we're extending north on Old Wadsworth. We also undertook an effort to plan Ralston Road. Ralston Road's over 100 years old. It's one of the original farm roads. In fact, it was State Highway 72 leading up into the hills. And it developed over time with single-family houses principally, and then converted, in mid-century to this sort of service-oriented center with small mom-and-pop businesses, lawyers, accountants, a psychic here, all kinds of different businesses, restaurants. And the problem is that they already are fairly close to the roadway as it's been expanded over time. Their front lawns have been converted into parking, and if we're going to make it a little bit more livable or walkable, we're talking about some pretty, serious impacts to these little mom and pop businesses. So that, the 4-lane compact street standard is what we are trying to identify going forward for this area. Notice that it has the detached sidewalk, a little tree lawn. You've got wider travel lanes. Taking a look at the right-hand side, you can see already that that bus is traveling in the gutter within inches of the sidewalk, which in many cases are narrower even than this, and in spite of that is still sprawling over into the middle lane. So Ralston just definitely has its issues. If you're walking on that sidewalk, you worry about being slapped by the mirrors. You literally keep to the inside because it's quite hazardous. So we're grappling with how we can work toward a sort of complete streets template, but do it in a way that doesn't dramatically impact all of our businesses along that route. There's over 100 curb cuts. The accident rate is 3 or 4 times what we see on 72nd, that first slide that Kevin showed. So we're right now, based upon the concern that folks have had, we're taking a step back. We're going to do some preliminary engineering and try to move forward more slowly, working in tandem with the property owners to see if we can come up with a modified concept that kind of addresses some of our aims, gives us a chance to grow into a place that's more of a place over time as the Gold Line comes online, but that still respects these the need for viability for these folks going forward. And then some other challenges. Just thought we'd talk about a few things. One is connecting those far-flung neighborhoods, the more traditional suburban neighborhoods that aren't so close to services, were built for the auto, et cetera. Kevin talked about our recent comp plan. We've gone through and we're trying to plan for the redevelopment of those areas with some mixed use so that you literally redevelop in a way that provides services closer to those folks and in a more walkable fashion. And transportation is the other piece. The city is, I think, working with RTD on its plan for connecting to the fast track stations going forward. So those are two of the strategies that Arvada has already undertaken. The slide on the right is also from DU's Center for Colorado's Economic Future, and this is an eye-opener for me. What it details is the spending patterns by age of householder. I don't know if you can read it, but the age increases as you go to the right. And just put in a nutshell, what they found in their research is that younger people and families tend to buy things. And things, yield sales tax revenue for cities and local governments in the state. But what happens as we age is we shift our spending into services. And of course, services don't, so that's why the bar on the right-hand side, which is age 65 plus, that's why that bar is so much lower. So you can understand, everybody in this room would understand the implications for our revenue basis going forward. So not only will we see the great increase in service needs, but we'll also see a decline probably in the sales tax revenue generated because of this increasing number of people in that upper end who aren't buying things. So that's, to me, a sobering prospect that we haven't even begun to get our hands around. We've got a new city manager, and fortunately, he does a 10-year budget model and rather than 5. And I think that's the kind of thing that will help us to get a handle on what we might be seeing long-term in terms of our economic base. But I didn't want to end on a bad note. I wanted to talk about some of the opportunities associated with an aging population. Obviously, volunteerism. I mean, the people who are older are the ones who really make things happen oftentimes in your communities. We operate the Arvada Center. We couldn't open the doors if it wasn't for the seniors who volunteer there. Over 300 people. Most of them are retired. They do everything from take tickets, sell the refreshments, usher you to your seat, help us undertake some of the development and fundraising. So, replicate that through all your facilities, the reservoir, the police department, where you can make use and take advantage of the great expertise and rich experience of those folks. Diversifying neighborhoods. Suburbs, we all built with, these subdivisions, tract housing, and those tended to provide pretty homogeneous populations. So I think with things like the policies that have been described and with greater transit, fast tracks, et cetera, that we'll see more diversification in our neighborhoods, and I think that's healthy. That's really a good thing for us to have. And then finally, based on a quick conversation with Carol McLennan, I think you can make the case for these things on an economic basis, actually, for the kinds of policies we're talking about. And I have only a little bit of circumstantial evidence, but I'll tell you that Old Town, which already embodies many of the things that we're talking about here, of all the shopping areas that we track in Arvada, during the big recession from 2009-10, they all saw big decreases in the amount of sales tax collections. The only area that posted a gain was Old Town. So I just think that's an example of why that kind of an area is attractive. It works. It can help you address some of the economic structural issues. So anyway, I'll wrap it up. And I don't know if you do.